A new New York Times report shows is basically what the Chinese are saying on the ground about President Trump. They're saying they love him. They said after President Trump's visit to the Forbidden City, Chinese citizens gave him affable nicknames like Uncle Trump, Donald the Strong, and Grand Commander. The New York Times says the Chinese now heaping praise on Trump and the First Family. They're fawning over his rapid-fire tweets. They've even created an online fan club. The New York Times adding the Chinese praised Trump's, quote, irrepressible style, his skill as an entertainer, and his willingness to say what he thinks. Many also like the fact that he seems less inhibited than prior American presidents about recognizing China as a superpower, as an equal on the global stage. And after years of American presidents lecturing China on issues like political prisoners and democracy, the Chinese say they are now relieved to see a leader who's talking about deal-making as well than the other issues. All of that combined with those issues, but also trade. They say Mr. Trump has changed the tone of America's conversation with China, because people are sort of tired of listening, this is the Chinese saying this, to politically correct criticisms. And now we can talk to each other. There is an issue of political prisoners in China. That is a subject of a lot of debate at the UN and elsewhere in this country. But what the New York Times is focusing on is the president opening up a really aggressive push for jobs here in the United States via bilateral relations with countries like China. Let's bring a former member of UK Parliament, John Browne, joining me now. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Liz.
Now, John, you've talked about this, that we can only have strong businesses and economic growth if national security is strong. But remember how much Europe and the media loved President Obama for apologizing for America, for doing things like bowing to the Japanese emperor, to the Saudi king, and for criticizing America in speech and apologizing for America overseas, the apology tour. What do you think of the Chinese now liking Trump's tough, pragmatic approach?
Well, I think they feel, as I do, that the voters of the United States, of which I am a proud one, voted for a president who would stand up for America and for us. And there it is. And even the Chinese respect it. The Chinese and a lot of people in the Far East do not have our political correctness and softness and weakness. They're still tough. And they respect people that stand up and don't just bow on the ground, crawling like snakes. They are tough, and they stand up for what they believe and for their countries and their people. And President Trump is the first one, in my view, since Kennedy over Cuba and President Reagan with Gorbachev on the wall in Berlin and so on. And so it's the great sigh of relief.
You know, sir, the media is going haywire with President Trump's handshake with Vladimir Putin today. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's stupid. It's totally counterproductive if two leaders hate each other and don't get on. How is it possible to create a compromise? The whole secret is to schmooze, if anything, the leaders on the other side of the table in negotiations, but certainly to earn their respect and, if possible, friendship, so that when deals and yet negotiate toughly and hopefully reach a compromise where both sides gain, as opposed to just a win-win, which means that the negotiations mean nothing to the losing party. Yeah. And in order to get winning on both sides, good manners and politeness and respect are vital.
You know, the New York Times said today that Chinese praised President Trump because they, quote, have a strong revulsion and hostility toward political correctness in Western society. One political blogger, Chen Chai-bing, he's in Shanghai, he put up a post this week that says, quote, the Chinese see themselves in Trump. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we should be having the same revulsion against political correctness, which was started, incidentally, by the communists in West Europe, in Frankfurt. It was known as the Frankfurt Group after the First World War, to see why communism wasn't spreading fast enough in the West. It fled the Nazis for New York and then moved from New York to California. And if you notice, political correctness comes sweeping across America from California through New York and on to London and into Europe. And it's weakening, terribly weakening to the Western system. One of the great aims of it, of course, is to cut communications between people. In other words, you can't say certain words. You have to say about 15 words or 5 words, which mean almost nothing. And so even ideas are hard to get across amongst the people. The Democrats talk democracy just as communism did, okay, but they actually act repression.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Browne. Thank you so much for coming on. We love having you on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have said something wrong.
No,
did I?
no, you're
Have me
terrific.
on
No,
for-
we've got to move on to the next subject. We wish we could have you on the whole show. You've been terrific. Thanks. Come on again soon. We love having you on.